Yaviyasim,
the youngest of all,
Ujasvatim,
Ujasvati, Nama,
named.
Translation. Thereafter, Maharaj Priyavrata married Bhagishmati, the daughter of Prajapati named Vishwakarma. In her, he begot 10 sons equal to him in beauty, character, magnanimity, and other qualities. He also begot a daughter, the youngest of all, named Urjavati. So, Urjasvati. Please repeat. Thereafter, Maharaj Priyavrata married Bhagishmati,
Maharaj Priyavrata married Bhagishmati,
the daughter of Prajapati named Vishwakarma.
the daughter of Prajapati named Vishwakarma.
In her, he begot 10 sons,
In her he begot 10 sons,
equal to him in beauty,
character,
magnanimity,
and
other qualities.
other qualities.
He also begot a daughter,
the
youngest of all, named
Urjasvati.
But Maharaj Priyavrata not only carried out the order of Lord Brahma, but accepting the duties of government, but also married Bhagishmati, the daughter of Vishwakarma, one of the Prajapatis. Since Maharaj Priyavrata was fully trained in transcendental knowledge, he could have returned home and conducted the business of government as a brahmachari. Instead, however, when he returned to household life, he accepted a wife also. The principle is that when one becomes a grihastha, he must live perfectly in that order, which means he must live peacefully with a wife and children. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first wife died, his mother requested him to marry for a second time. He was 20 years old and was going to take sannyas at the age of 24, yet by the request of his mother, he married. As long as I'm in household life, he told his mother, I must have a wife. For household life does not mean staying in a house. Your household life means living in a house with a wife. These words in this verse are very significant. Uha-vava. These words are used to express wonder. Priyavrata Maharaj had taken a vow of renunciation by it, but accepting a wife and begetting children have nothing to do with the path of renunciation. These are activities on the path of enjoyment. It was a source of great wonder, therefore, that Priyavrata Maharaj should follow the path of renunciation, had now accepted the path of enjoyment. Sometimes we are criticized because, although I am a sannyasi, I have taken part in the marriage ceremonies of my disciples. It must be explained, however, that since we have started a Krishna conscious society, and since a human society must also have ideal marriages, to correctly establish an ideal society, we must take part in marrying some of its members. Although we have taken to the path of renunciation, this may be astonishing to persons who are not very interested in establishing Daivi Varnashrama, the transcendental system of 4 social orders and 4 spiritual orders. Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, however, wanted to re-establish Daivi Varnashrama. In Daivi Varnashrama, there cannot be acknowledgement of social status according to birthright, because in Bhagavad Gita it is said that the determining considerations are guna and karma, one's qualities and work. It is this Daivi Varnashrama that should be established all over the world to continue a perfect society for Krishna consciousness. This may be astonishing to foolish critics, but it is one of the functions of Krishna conscious society. Om Agyanatmananda Shyama Janaslataya Chaturvitamina Padmashi Gurave Namaha Gaprati Rachalam Padmalaya Devim Yandipatamamate Shudunitaranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sadguru Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thereafter, Maharaj Priyavrata married Bhagishmati, the daughter of Prajapati named Vishwakarma. In her, he begot 10 sons, equal to him in beauty, character, magnanimity, and other qualities. He also begot a daughter, the youngest of all, named Urjasvati. Interesting here. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, Lord Chaitanya told his mother, as long as I am in household life, I must have a wife, for household life does not mean staying in a house. Real household life means living in a house with a wife. So there are many people who stay in houses, such as brahmacharis and sannyasis, and they're not householders, brahmacharinis. But so grihastha life means to have a wife, or for a wife to have a husband, and mostly that means also children. And Srila Prabhupada said that for those householders who want to live in the temple and do full-time service, then the temple can supply the bare necessities of life. But if they want more than that, then they have to make their own arrangements. So that means full-time service, and the temple looks after your needs. If they don't want to do full-time service, or their needs are higher than bare necessities, then they must look after themselves. So Prabhupada also called us Grihastha Brahmachari. So this is the wonder of the Acharya. Not that he's making something up, but because it's divine. Daivi Varnashram means that we do it in relation to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada mentions here that it's not by birthright, but by guna and karma. So it's a divine system set up by Krishna, and the purpose of it is to elevate everyone regardless of what situation you're in, regardless of what your social or spiritual order is. Then the whole process is there for gradual elevation. And regardless of what order we're in, the one constant thing which is there is service to Krishna. Accepting Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and our life is centered around that. So if we're a Sudra, then we do something which is in that category, which is for Krishna. Same if we're a Vaishya, or a Kshatriya, or Brahmin. So it's not necessarily that every Brahmin is Krishna conscious. There are some Brahmins who are not Krishna conscious. They may actually just be doing this as some kind of ritualistic thing. Just like we had the story of Krishna cowherd boys. They were tending the calves and they became hungry. So they went to the Brahmins and asked them, "Oh, please feed us." And the Brahmins said, "No, we're too busy doing puja." They couldn't see that Krishna was in front of them. Now, if they had devotion, they'd have seen that Krishna is Supreme Lord. If they'd understand Krishna to be the cause of all causes. But the wives of the Brahmins, they actually catered to the Lord's desires and fed all the cowherd boys and Krishna and Balaram. So the main thing is to be Krishna conscious, whatever your situation may be. And we should, if we're Krishna conscious in our situation, sometimes we think we have to change our situation, not make us more Krishna conscious. Now that may be the case if you're in a situation which is surrounded by things which are detrimental for Krishna consciousness. But most people, they have the freedom to choose how they want to organize their lives. And it means you can be Krishna conscious in your own situation. So it's not necessarily that living in the temple makes you more Krishna conscious. It has potential to make you more Krishna conscious. And but it has, and it's not. It's an easy thing living in the temple. We have to, when we're living with same people all the time, then we have to learn to tolerate each other. And because we give up everything to live in a temple, we don't have something to fall back on. We don't have some material situation to fall back on because we cut our ties. So this is what it really means by living in the temple, living in the Lord's house. So the temple room itself is like the Lord's house. So when we're in the temple room itself, then we have to be careful to observe the various guidelines which are given in back to us about the Sindhu, nectar of devotion, things that we should and shouldn't do. The Krishna consciousness is not all about rules and regulations, but there are some directives there which help us to be Krishna conscious, because it teaches us how to respect Krishna and how not to disrespect, such as there's many things we shouldn't do. Can anyone tell me one thing we shouldn't do while in the temple? John?
Smoke opium.
Smoke opium. Shouldn't smoke opium. Shouldn't smoke anything in the temple. That's true.
Wearing shoes.
Shouldn't wear shoes in the temple. Why not?
It's contaminating.
Yeah, the shoes go everywhere, they're dirty, and often they're leather as well. Anything else?
Should point your feet towards the deities.
Shouldn't point their feet towards the deities, that's right. So like, mostly in the temples we sit down cross-legged, but if you just sit down and point your feet towards the deities, that's considered disrespect, because the feet are the lowest part of the body. So therefore, if someone wants to be humble to a superior, generally they touch that person's feet to their head, which means your lowest part is higher than my highest part, which means they're humbling themselves. Something else? Yeah, no mundane grumya kata, it's called village talk. Shouldn't be just, oh yeah, I like your hair, that's very nice, and where did you get those socks? And did you hear what she said? Oh yeah, I heard that, that was terrible. This grumya kata can be saved for when you're an eternally liberated soul and you go back to Vrindavan, then that's okay. But until then, it's not good. The village talk, gossiping. Something else?
You should wear suitable clothes.
Should wear suitable clothes.
Long arms and covering our legs.
You see in some temples, you should wear suitable clothes, that's right. Although in the West, sometimes there's some adjustment for that, because if you were to ask everyone to wear suitable clothes, then many people wouldn't come in the temple. In India, you'll find though it says no half pant. Does anyone know what half pant means?
Shorts.
Short trousers, yeah. Don't know what it means, long shorts or short longs, but yeah, no short trousers, no gamsha. Sometimes you might get like a rickshaw while just coming into the temple in a gamsha. Things like that. Many of the temples don't allow photography, because people take photographs of the deities. Not so much now, because most of the things are on, they're on digital, so they're stored within the camera. But people used to take photographs, develop them, and then before you know it, the deity's photographs are considered non-different from the deity. And if those photographs are just left lying around, then it's not respectful to the deity. Recognize you guys one?
One should not chastise anyone in front of the deity.
How dare you tell me that? Yes. Shouldn't chastise anyone in front of the deity. It's not right to do that. We shouldn't fall asleep in front of the deity. We shouldn't eat in front of the deity. We shouldn't pass air in front of the deity. Certain colours we shouldn't wear in front of the deities as well. Mainly red and black, or is it red and blue?
Red and blue.
Red and blue. Anyone remember why? Yeah, Radharani versus colours. Of course, we may not be able to follow all of those all the time. It's like, oh, I can't come to Mangalarti, I've only got a blue shirt today, so better we come to Mangalarti. But certain things we can avoid, like certainly we don't eat in front of the deity. And falling asleep in front of the deity, that's also not good. If we're falling asleep, then we should stand up and keep our eyes open. to avoid that, then we sit in such a way which is actually going to make us attentive. And the purpose of being in front of the deities is to get their blessings, get their benediction, and the purpose of having discourses of Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita in front of the deities is that we're discussing the Lord's pastimes, the Lord's philosophy in front of the Lord, and the Lord likes to hear these instructions as well. He likes to see the devotees becoming enlivened by hearing these discourses. So, in the beginning of ISKCON, and Prabhupada didn't introduce many rules and regulations, but in order to educate the devotees on the culture of devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, or Vedic culture, then he started to introduce various rules and regulations which are there to help us, because naturally we don't have that culture, we have to cultivate it. So cultivating means that we have to learn, and we may have to face up to the fact that we have some bad habits, we have some conditioning. So we have to be patient with ourselves and patient with each other. We have to also help each other so that we can progress. So the next paragraph, the purport Prabhupada says, 3 words in this verse are very significant. U-ha-vava. So U-ha-vava means as it is celebrated, wonderful. That's the word for word there. And these words are used to express wonder. It's Prabhupada Maharaj have taken a vow of renunciation, but accepting a wife and begetting children have nothing to do with the path of renunciation. These are activities on the path of enjoyment. It was a source of great wonder, therefore, that Prabhupada Maharaj, who had followed the path of renunciation, had now accepted the path of enjoyment. So on the surface it appears that he accepted the path of enjoyment, but actually because he is Krishna conscious, then he wasn't seeing these this grihastha situation as some distraction. So once again, we're talking about this principle of yukta vairagya. When we see that something belongs to the Lord, typically, anybody here ever worked for a company where you had to drive a company car? I used to have to fix company cars, and give an idea of how people treat company cars. There was one man who used to fix his car, and when his ashtray became full, he just put them all over the floor, and it was unbelievable. I don't know how the guy could actually afford to smoke so many cigarettes, but the car was just littered with cigarettes, and the nice white upholstery on the roof was just like gone from yellow to brown. Who knows what his lungs were like? But when you see his own car, then that was a different thing. He didn't treat his own car like that. And similarly, the other company cars, there's so many scrapes and bashes, and people don't bother checking the water, the oil, things like that. But their own vehicles, when it's like that, or even their own buildings. So we shouldn't have that kind of mentality that we just like the other day, we came to start the green van and nobody decided to even bother mentioning that it had no fuel in it. So it's this kind of mentality is Yoga mentality of laziness. Let someone else do it. Let someone else do it. Why not you? It's all about service, isn't it? It's serving, not that let someone else serve me. I'm the king. Someone else will check this in it. Someone else will check that. Someone else will clean this. So this someone else will go back to Godhead, and we'll stay in the material world. And so that someone else, you might be thinking, oh, that person things, or they're doing too much or whatever. But actually, we have an opportunity to go back to Godhead, and that's very good. We might think, okay, everybody else go before me, you all do the service, but that's not what it's about. Srila Prabhupada was very keen that we want to go back to Godhead. Sometimes people say, well, I'll just take birth the next time, maybe a better opportunity. But what's better opportunity than what we have now? Who can say we're going to have a better opportunity next time? Who knows what situation we'll be born into, what kind of Maya will be there to distract us. We've got Prabhupada's books, we've got the Holy Name, we've got the Association of Devotees, we've got the deities, we've got Prasadam, we've got Charnamrita, we have everything. So what could be better than that? Can anyone mention anything which would be better than all those facilities? So everything is there. These are all supremely auspicious blessings from the Acharya. So don't wait to think, well, let me just put my feet up and maybe next life. Next life you'll have to face death again. You'll spend your whole life fearing death again. All the fears which we have, they accumulate as a fear of death. But for a devotee, then they have no fear of death, because they think, well, ultimately it's in Krishna's hands. But Prabhupada wasn't in favour of the devotees thinking, well, if Krishna wants me to take birth again to serve his movement, then I'll do that. No, he was saying, just get out in the material world, that's your purpose. So, and then if Krishna wants, then that's up to Krishna. Even in terms of conservationism and ecology and things like that, Prabhupada said, just leave that to them, just go back to the spiritual world, just go back home. Don't even try to make the prison cell nice. So for the purpose of preaching, that may be there, and also because of the Isavasyan principle, that we see everything belonging to Krishna, and we usually have everything in Krishna's service, and we don't want to misuse anything or waste anything. And the devotee naturally, they won't waste the resources of material nature. We don't have to be told that. Even as a child, anyone remember as a child breathing in exhaust fumes and thinking, oh, this is terrible, this is poisonous, isn't it? Even as a child, you can understand that. It doesn't take, you have to go to university, get a degree to understand that we're polluting the world. Anyone can understand it. So it's no big thing. We don't have to create an industry around it. We simply just have to have a simple life. Sometimes when the devotees are distributing books on the street, and people will say, oh, I don't take books, I want to save the trees. But if they read this one book, they'll save forests of trees. So many things will change in their life that they begin to appreciate. Even Prabhupada showed to the extent that he's seen everything as Krishna's energy, Krishna's property. On the morning walk, on 2 occasions at least that we knew of, someone had left a tap running in the garden, and Prabhupada deviated from the morning walk and went and switched it off and said that you're wasting Krishna's energy. So this is the mood of a devotee. Simply, even you get up in the morning and you're running the tap and all that water's been down the sink and the meter's just going like this and we're just giving out money and you're brushing your teeth while the tap's running. These are things that we learned when traveling Sankirtan, to be very frugal. To be frugal with Krishna's energy and not waste it. So we have to train ourselves that we utilize Krishna's energy, not that we live too austere, that we are sick all the time, not that we can't put any heating in the temple room or in our house at home. We don't have to be overly austere. But we shouldn't be wasteful as well, we should be mindful, leaving the lights on when nobody's around, things like that. And all that money that we save, we can use it for Krishna's service, publish more books, make more preaching programs, distribute more prasadam. So devotee is very attentive. So the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the Sadhuswami Astakam that they bowed down on scheduled measurement This means that they were very aware of every moment of their time, how they utilized it in Krishna service. So a devotee can do that in whatever situation they're in, whether they're grihasta or brahmachari, sannyasi, whatever. One can be in Maya in any of these social or spiritual orders, or one can be in Krishna consciousness in any of them. So it's all about being Krishna conscious, utilizing our time. Krishna's given us a certain time. Our lifespan is going to be a certain period of time. And the thing is to utilize that time to propagate this Krishna consciousness movement. If we're simply interested with our own salvation, then that becomes more difficult, just like we were reading recently. Manu Samhita, that's what it was. So Shuta Kirti, personal servant of Srila Prabhupada, he recalled one story where the devotees were talking about some rules and regulations of the Manu Samhita, and Prabhupada said, forget Manu Samhita, you can't even touch it, or to speak of translating it. He says, according to the Manu Samhita, you're all lectures, yavanas and chandalas, you're already untouchables, you're outcast, you're unqualified. So we're actually not referring to the Manu Samhita. If you do that, then immediately you put yourself in a fallen condition. But actually, we're depending on the holy name. Harinam is the Yugadharma. This is our saving grace, Harinam Sankirtan. The chanting of the holy name and the propagating of the holy name. So this, and the way to actually get the mercy of the holy name is to give it. We can't just keep it to ourselves. If we keep it to ourselves, that's called kripana, that's called mansali. We have to give it to others. And if for some reason we are very shy or something like that, then the least we can do also is to serve those with full enthusiasm, full determination to serve the mission, which is propagating that. Hari Saripuri once told me that in his experience of traveling throughout many different communities, he says that those who do not preach, then they simply quarrel with each other. They just come to that point. So the preaching is a common denominator, and that is the oil in the engine. If you run an engine without any oil in it, simply there's friction, and then it seizes up. So similarly, this Prabhupada says preaching is the essence. So we have to be preaching. And another translation of preaching is sharing. We have to be sharing our Krishna consciousness. We can share with each other, even on a lockdown, we can share with each other. If you're at home and you're on your own, you can phone up someone. You can do a Zoom call, and there's many devotees doing many different programs. And if we're living in a temple, then we can share our Krishna consciousness. We're all reading Prabhupada's books, so we share what we've read because it's so enthusiastic. I remember the one devotee, Guru Bihari, an old friend and godbrother, whenever you were reading with him, he could hardly read a paragraph. Like you would be reading one book, he'd be reading another, and you could hardly read a sentence or a paragraph, but he'd have to stop and share it because he was just so struck with wonder at the amazing content of Krishna consciousness. So such is the mood of the devotee. They just, when they find something, just like here, the words in the purport are uhavava. These words are used to express wonder. So when the devotee reads Prabhupada's books, he's struck with wonder, thinking, wow, this is amazing. I remember the first time I was reading Bhagavatam, I'm thinking, I have to take notes, and then it came to the point where I practically was just going to write the whole Bhagavatam because everything is so valid and so valuable. Anybody have that experience where they're writing notes, they don't know where to stop? And you think, I better just read the Bhagavatam. Sometimes, I'm not in favour of this practice myself. I'm not sure if Prabhupada was, but sometimes people underline things in the books. And I've came across books where practically everything's underlined. You think, well, that's a glorification that they appreciate everything's important. Therefore, we have to keep on reading these books again and again so that we remember them. When you're reading it, you're thinking, oh, that's so amazing. That I can't wait to read this again. And that's the nature of it, that you read it again and again and again. And it never comes to the point where you think, well, now I understand it completely. It will never come to that point. You can simultaneously have complete understanding and yet go deeper and deeper, because that's the nature of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada then goes on to explain about how, as a sannyasi, he was being criticized for performing marriages of his disciples because sannyasis shouldn't do these things. But because he's demonstrating Daivi Varnashram, that we can do anything in the name of Krishna, then he wasn't being restricted to being a sannyasi. He's actually rising above that, and he is Parivrajakacharya. Can anyone tell me what Parivrajakacharya means?
Is it the one who travels around the world?
One who travels around the world, yeah. Any other meaning to that? Anyone can expand? Yeah, so just like you have parikrama, that means to circumambulate, to walk. So Parivrajakacharya means the one who travels all over the world and establishes Krishna consciousness. Acharya means teaching by example. So Prabhupada was doing this. He couldn't be confined to the parameters of what a sannyasi can and cannot do. And this way, we wouldn't have Krishna consciousness. He'd have had to wait for some grihastha devotee come from India to marry his disciples. You know, how would that happen? But you can see, as soon as Prabhupada got his disciples qualified, he would have them doing yajnas, he'd have them doing marriages. So this is called Deshakalapatra, time, place, and circumstance. And this is also an eternal principle. For someone who's preaching Krishna consciousness in the material world, they always have to apply time, place, and circumstance. Just like Jesus Christ, he said, I have more to teach you, but you cannot bear it as yet. So he could have given them so much more, but they had to take what he was giving first to come to the next stage. And that's why Srila Prabhupada said that first we should read Bhagavad Gita, then Srimad Bhagavatam, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is the Bhagavad Gita is the ABC, and Srimad Bhagavatam is known as the postgraduate study, and Chaitanya Charitamrita is known as the
PhD.
could be could be PhD. I can't remember actually what he said. I was hoping that someone else would. But this is when you read the pastimes of Krishna in the 10th canto, having read the previous 9 cantos, then you understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's been likened to that when you see the deities at first, when you see a very respectful person, and you see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you shouldn't just look straight into their face. That's considered to be disrespectful, considered to be rude. First you look at their feet, and then you go up, and then you look at their face. And this is what we should do when the deities' curtains open. First we look at the lotus feet, and then we go up and finally see their face. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto is the lotus feet, and then gradually progressing up to the 10th canto, which is the lotus face of the Lord. So by this time, when we come to read the 10th canto, then we've already read so many wonderful pastimes of the Lord, which establishes His supremacy, and that Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, the source of all incarnations, Avatari. And then there's no doubt. So when we read Krishna's pastimes, we don't impose our contaminated, mundane idea of enjoyment upon them. And the idea is that by also reading these previous cantos, we become purified. So when we read Krishna's pastimes, we're not envious. We're not thinking, well, that should be me, that could be me. How can I enjoy like that? And there are some people known as sahajas, which means ones who take things cheaply. they want to be advanced without doing the hard work, or they want to be. It's just like, and it's kind of ridiculous. So back in Uganda in the 70s, there was a tyrant called Idi Amin. Anybody remember him? Were you from Uganda, Raj?
No.
You were Kenya?
Sorry?
Kenya?
India.
You didn't come straight out, you came straight from. So,
Made in India. Made in India.
So many of the Indian population in the UK came from East Africa. Many of them from Uganda. At one point there was one tyrant called Idi Amin, and he was modern day Rakshasa. He was actually considered to be a cannibal. He was very happy just to execute people and kill people at the slightest whim of anything. He expelled so many people from his country, and there was so much genocide and slaughter going on there. But somehow or another he considered himself to be a great hero. He wrote to the Queen and said, I want you to give me the Victorian Cross, because he was so puffed up. He thought the highest award at that time was the VC, the Victoria Cross. But of course she wasn't going to give him it, so what did he do? He honoured himself with it and his son, who was just a small boy. And it was such a ridiculous thing that, of course, people in his own country would show up for the ceremony for fear of their life, but there was no meaning to it. There was no substance. Nothing had been done to achieve that Victoria Cross, and it was actually an insult to those who had earned it through their bravery and sacrifice, etc. Similarly, if one just wants to cheaply enjoy Krishna's pastimes without undergoing the necessary purification and without the adhikar or the qualification of service and surrender, then one risks spoiling the devotional service. So we should be very careful not to just want to cheaply jump to high levels or to imitate devotees on high levels. So the difference between following the footsteps and imitating, can anyone tell me?
Following the footsteps is actually being humble and trying to learn something, and to imitate somebody is just nonsense.
Mm-hmm. So anyone else, anything else?
Following the process of outlining rather than just external style or.
That's it, you have to follow the process, to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. So in this way we can keep ourselves safe. So there were some, even back from Thakur's time, there was one demon called Vishakashira who had some yogic mystic powers, and he misused these powers to subjugate the locals, and because the people were afraid of them, he was telling them, send your daughters to the forest in the dead of night to enjoy Rasa Leela with me, and if they didn't, then he could kill them. And he actually had some mystic powers where he demonstrated these, so they're very much afraid of him. So this is what we call Rascal Leela, not Rasa Leela, Rascal Leela. He's a complete rascal. He wants to enjoy like the Supreme Lord, but the Supreme Lord doesn't have to use force to attract his devotees, they're automatically attracted. So, but finally, Bhaktivinoda Thakur brought him down, and then he had these big matted rocks, and he cut his hair, and he lost all his Shakti. It was contained within there, which is a parallel story with the Bible and Samson and Delilah, isn't it? So there's a bit of truth in there too. So Srila Prabhupada, he was very careful to maintain, even amidst the Western countries, to maintain Krishna consciousness, to maintain the basic principles of Krishna consciousness, but yet sometimes the details would change according to necessity so that the higher goal could be attained. And he also uses this word astonishing at the end of his purport. He says, Uha Vava means wonder or astonishment. So at the end of the purport, I don't know if it's humour or not, but it could be seen as humour, that in this Daivavarnashram that should be established, sorry, it is this Daivavarnashram that should be established all over the world to continue a perfect society of Krishna consciousness. This may be astonishing to foolish critics, but it is one of the functions of a Krishna conscious society. So Srila Prabhupada used that same word again, the same words to explain that they may be struck with wonder at how someone can do such a thing. But then we can see that Srila Prabhupada was able to establish a Krishna conscious society worldwide. Even now, although physically he's not here, the proof that Vani is more important, or the instruction of the spiritual master, is that his will is still being continued. And as he said, that there's the only shortage of anything in the world is Krishna consciousness. So if people become Krishna conscious, animal slaughter will stop, deforestation will stop, regeneration of desertified areas, that will begin again if care protection is continued. And the myth of overpopulation, these things as well. But still, even though we're on a lockdown and there's a virus, still people just determined to enjoy, and people are going crazy because they can't get to enjoy. Recently I was speaking with some workmen, and when they were locked down, they said they were practically begging their bosses to get them back to work. Normally they can't be bothered with work. They can't wait for it to be finished and they skive off and things like that, but they see actually the value of it. Everybody has to have some work. So this is what the Varnashram system is for, is that everybody has some engagement, and if we have this engagement connected to Krishna, then it's elevating for us. Even the rickshaw driver, you go to Vrindavan, you see the rickshaw driver is Krishna conscious. I'll just give one short story in that regard and then we can finish. Is that one time one devotee, he was in Vrindavan and his young daughter, 3-year-old, suddenly died, and they were having some big ceremony at the temple. And the rickshaw driver said, what's going on here? What's the big? And he said, oh, it's my daughter, she died. And he said, but what's the need for the big ceremony? He said, I also had a young child who died. He said, but Krishna gives, Krishna takes away. You know, we never were ours, so we just accept that any day Krishna will take, he's given today, maybe tomorrow he'll take. So such a high level of Krishna consciousness means that they're never in anxiety. So this is something to aim towards, is that the more we see things in relation to Krishna, the less troublesome life can be even within this material world. Anyone get any questions or comments?
Yeah, you were talking about mentalities. For example, someone's driving a company car or a private car, and some years ago I met someone, we were talking about vegetarian, to be a vegetarian, and this person was eating meat, and I asked this person, why are you eating meat? And the answer was, if I don't eat meat, this meat, someone else will eat this meat. And I would like to ask you what kind of mentality is behind this answer.
Yeah, it's certainly a mistake to think if they don't eat it, someone else will eat it, because it's supply and demand, isn't it?
Yeah.
If the demand is there, so if everybody thinks like that, then nothing will change.
Yeah.
But if everybody thinks, well, I'm not going to eat it, then who's going to kill it? Who's going to rear them for slaughter? It's all about supply and demand. If everyone stops smoking cigarettes, the factories aren't going to keep on making the cigarettes. So it's about supply and demand. So it's just a feeble excuse to actually not do what the conscience is telling them. It's basically, sometimes you see people have excuses like that. Or it's, if they don't eat them, then they'll overrun the place. You know, it's not a fact. They won't overrun the place. And even Prabhupada said that if they have to eat meat, at least wait till they die naturally, don't kill them. And then there's no sin in killing them. Just like when I was in Findhorn, I met one boy who, mostly he was vegetarian, but he sometimes ate meat, but it was roadkill. But still, now there's no karma involved in doing that, because unless you're going out with your car and aiming at the animals. But if you just find some dead animal on the road and you eat it, then you haven't killed it. But at the same time, what's it going to do to your consciousness? And it's not offerable to Krishna. So, yet kroshi dashasi, whatever you do should be done as an offering unto me. Patram pushpam palam to yam. If one offers me with love and devotion, fruit, flower and water, I will accept it. So for a devotee, we only eat that which is offerable to Krishna. And meat is never offerable to Krishna. So people sometimes they believe their own excuses, and they think it's because they're sometimes blinded by their desire to do something, then they can believe their own excuse, their own reason. They think it's a valid reason. And of course, it's a fact that even unfortunately, animals have been slaughtered, and sometimes their bodies don't even get sold, and it just goes in the bin. And that slaughter was for nothing. You know, rearing that animal up many months or years, it's slaughtered, and then part of it just goes in the bin. It's like a sin beyond consideration. It's bad enough to kill them, but then they don't even eat them eventually. People kill animals and they cook it, eat it, and then they throw half of it away. They don't realise this is what they're doing to themselves. This is what they're going to experience themselves. That their life is going to be so little value in the future, just as they hold little value for other living entities' lives. Now, in the future, other living entities will hold so little value for their life that it doesn't matter. You know, it's only worth a little bit of metal or paper. You give me some metal, you kill that animal, and I'll eat half of it and chuck the rest in the bin because I can't be bothered. I know it's quite heavy and negative, but this is the reality of it. This is what people are facing. But Krishna consciousness, people read these books, they'll stop eating meat. They'll stop harvesting the rainforests, and there's so many things that will stop. But if we try to do it artificially, we'll see many years ago, I remember there was a CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and the people were walking down campaigning against nuclear bomb, and they're eating hamburgers and beef burgers. They don't realise that this animal slaughter is what's going to bring the war. No matter how much protest you do, if you're doing some karmic thing against the laws of nature, it's going to come back. So people have to understand, they have to learn that there are laws of nature and there is a reaction. And then when they begin to understand what is to be done and what is not to be done, then the future. Prabhupada said that even if everyone becomes vegetarian, and just that one thing alone, then the climate would improve, the weather would improve. And we see there's actually been done scientific research showing that. So, is that okay? This Sundari the key.
Jai.
Prabhupada key.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam key.
Yeah.
Hari Bol. Please,